Where does free speech end online? You want the technical answer? Right over there at your router. That's probably not even your router. That's probably the cable company's router. And they can decide what goes through it and through their network. The same can be said for social media outlets. Now, it's hard to complain about those because we don't pay for them. They're supposedly free. I mean, you haven't paid for a tweet yet, right? Twitter is still free. Actually, Twitter hasn't been free in a while, and it's not because of Comcast or Cox, it's because of Geahk. There's no free speech on Twitter, and everyone knows it. It's one of many platforms where wrongthink is punished, and wrong thinkers are shipped off to digital prisons. If you need proof of this, simply do a search for Sargon of Akkad, Bunty King, or Milo Yiannopoulos on Twitter. They're not on that platform any longer. They've been exiled. At their core, YouTube and Facebook are really no different. Now, the libertarians are right in this instance. Don't let it go to your heads. These are all private companies that can regulate content. The customers are also right. They have the right to berate and pressure companies to stop sucking and provide a better, less restrictive product. But here's where the conversation needs to rewind and kind of start over again. Back at your cable company's router over there. That's where the dividing line is, where your space ends and where the space of the internet begins. And the internet is not a public space. It's really a collection of an almost infinite number of private spaces. The servers, the switches, the backhauls, and pipelines are all privately owned, just like the websites, the hosts, the apps, the petabytes of data residing in racks upon rows upon warehouses. Yes, even your tiny little router. That's all private space, and it's not your private space. You pay people, or you let them make merchandise of you in exchange. They let you into that private space. That's where the conversations are happening. That's where the debates are happening. That's where the minds and hearts of the public voters are being solidified, influenced, convinced, indoctrinated, and affirmed in a space that someone else owns. At some point, these owners realize the immense power and potential of the digital real estate market. They own our conversations, our debates. They own our ability to widely and effectively share a counterpoint to the narrative. They own the ability to be effective opposition to anything, but especially to progressivism, given that the CEOs and leadership of YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter are progressives, and progressives of the worst kind. Imagine if the digital magnates colluded against a well-known person, a so-called wrong thinker. What if such a person were given a lifetime ban from YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Google, and LinkedIn, and all the mainstream media outlets banned them? Does such a person truly still have freedom of speech? After such an erasure from the digital landscape, where would they speak? If they had earned and built an audience and a platform, and then they were simply deleted, do they in fact have freedom of speech? Or is it being suppressed? How is their speech through social media equal to standing on a corner handing out flyers or holding up a sign if that's all they were reduced to? Are those both really the same thing? If you are exiled from the digital marketplace to a place where no audience exists and all you can do is shout into the emptiness, then what? I think to an extent we're in new territory. The public discourse is not happening in private tap houses or pubs of yesteryear where talk was more or less unrestricted. Never before has free speech and the exchange of ideas occurred almost exclusively in policed and regulated private space. And this private space is under the ownership of digital landlords and slumlords who not only own most of the real estate, but also have an agenda for that real estate, often in complete disregard for the tenants in their digital flop houses. The spheres where the public is debating, discussing, and deciding the future of our rights and of our state are private spheres owned by those who wish to change culture to align with progressive values. Opposition has no place in these spheres. Google, Facebook, and Twitter want to change culture. Gone are the days of a business simply wanting to make a profit, have a killer stock price, and build a better mousetrap, so to speak. These corporations want to build their version of our future culture, and they'll do it by deciding what the current culture can or cannot talk about and debate. The way the law sits right now, there are no rights for others in someone else's private space. I mean, if you built a private space of your own, isn't it yours? If we insist on forcing businesses to adhere to certain rules, our line of reasoning probably goes something like this. I know that you built an amazing and catchy platform and that you did all the investment and all the work and it's all yours, but we're going to need to preempt that and take away some of your control of this platform because it's been so successful that now we have to do these things for the public good. You've built something so great and done so well that now you need to cede some of that over for the common welfare. To me, that sounds like the words of an authoritarian collectivist, looting something from a producer, from someone who actually made something. It's finding, endorsing, and maybe even creating a morality of special case collectivism to justify doing something to someone else to make them sacrifice something they made for what a group, probably an elite group, considers the public good. The public good is a slippery concept, and it is one that has been used for incredible amounts of inhumane evil in history. So where do we go from here? This is the part where I am supposed to offer some slick idea or solution, but this is more complicated than a pithy off-the-cuff idea in a video under 10 minutes long. I hate to say this, but I have no specific answers. Private space is where a huge portion of public dialogue and debate is occurring. Public rules can't apply here without violating someone's rights. The answer is more ideas and more creation of digital real estate outside the grasp of the current digital land barons who hold so much territory online. Perhaps a voluntary Internet Bill of Rights movement would draw consumers to businesses that would sign on to such a concept. Businesses that would market themselves as supporters or advocates for consumers' rights. There is talk of the expansion of the First Amendment to include all companies that control government-like amounts of peer-to-peer communications. After all, there is more control between 2 or 3 corporations over your speech than there is in the entire government, at least in practice right now. Additionally, as Google or other corporations provide services to the government or the public sector, there might be an argument to be made that if you are going to serve the public sector, then you have to uphold the public sector's rights, especially if you're going to contract for the government. There are obviously concerns and issues with each of these concepts, but these are the starting points for conversations about solutions. In general, the answer is more freedom of speech for everyone, everywhere, even online. But as for specifics on how to make it click, I have no answer. All I know is that if we don't find an answer soon, we will have nowhere left to discuss alternatives to the views of our digital landowners. I'd like to thank Susan Wojcicki for allowing me to post this message on her website.